which challenge us over long periods of time, but are very important for all of us to be involved in. I look forward to all the participants who are going to present at the conference, and we look forward to having some of you at our institute at some point in the near future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Errol, for your kind words. Now it is the time to invite Mr. Azimuddin Ahmed, Chairman, Board of Trustees of North-South University, to deliver his speech. Sir.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Respected Chair of the NASPAA South Asia Virtual Conference 2021, Professor Atiqul Islam, Vice Chancellor of North-South University, Honorable Chief Guest, Mr. M. Mannan MP, Honorable Minister, Ministry of Planning, Government of Bangladesh. Inaugural Speaker, Dr. Devapriya Bhattacharya, Distinguished Fellow of Center for Policy Dialogue, Joint Organizer of the International Conference, Dr. Angel Wright Lenter, Executive Director, NASPAA, USA. Mrs. Laurel McFarland, Senior Fellow, NASPAA, USA. Professor Errol D'Souza, Director of Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad, India. Distinguished Deans, Department Heads, faculty members of NSU, conference, participants of the conference, Assalamu alaikum and very good morning. I am indeed very happy that the South Asia Institute of Policy and Governance of North-South University network of schools of public policy, affairs, and administration of USA, NASPAA, and the Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad, India, have organized this virtual conference in collaborative manner by inviting and engaging top academics, researchers, policymakers from the government and development practitioners across the world, especially from South Asia. This has brought the opportunity of North-South University, the first private university in Bangladesh, which was established by a group of philanthropists, industrialists, civil servants, and academics, with a vision to be a center of excellence in higher education in this country. The mission of North-South University is to produce competent graduates in their selective disciplines with the hope that our students will become critical thinkers, ethical and socially responsible champions of diversity and tolerance, and at the same time be globally aware with the commitment to social justice and sustainability. The COVID-19 has impacted our life and livelihood in a varied way. Impact of COVID-19 is unprecedented in every sector of our life. The government of Bangladesh put utmost efforts to overcome these setbacks and recover from the economic losses. As the world has been grappling with the COVID-19 pandemic from early 2020, concerns are being raised about the preparedness of public leaders to deal with the similar future shocks. This is particularly a matter of great concern for South Asia, with a huge population and emerging economies. In this context, it is crucial not only to handle the present uncertainty, but also to be prepared for such likely future scenario. This conference aims at bringing together academics, practitioners, members of civil society, and representatives from the public and private sectors across Asia to share lessons learned from the COVID-19 pandemic. Considering the above backdrop, the organization of this virtual international conference is very pertinent both for the government, ministries, and institutions actors to prepare public leaders for the post-pandemic world. At the end, I would like to congratulate the paper presenters for their intellectual contributions to this contemporary and pertinent issue, not only for Bangladesh, but also for other countries. I am grateful to the Honorable Chief Guest for his time and interest in giving us time and to join the international conference. Also, I am grateful to NASPAA, USA, and IIM Ahmedabad, India, for being the part. Thank you all. Thank you very much. Allah Hafiz.
Thank you, sir, for this wonderful speech. Distinguished audience, now I would like to invite our chief guest, Mr. M.A. Mannan, MP, Honorable Minister, Ministry of Planning, Government of Bangladesh, to deliver his speech.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum. Very good day to everyone all around the world who have joined this very important gathering this morning in Dhaka, Bangladesh. I'd like to begin by thanking and congratulating our North-South University, which is has already created a positive impression in the academic field of Bangladesh. Today's event will further strengthen their position in this field, and I'm sure their collaboration with economies or academics in the US and our neighboring India has enriched this event further. I would like to begin by thanking Professor Dr. Tawfiq Haq for his introduction, and also the other speeches by Ms. Laurel McFarland, Triparna Vashidova, and Professor Errol D'Souza of IIM Ahmedabad, who have all set the trend for this 3 days conference. I feel very happy to see our good friend, Dr. Debapriya Bhattacharya here, who will be presenting a keynote paper on this very important issue, and which will be discussed and analyzed by other scholars in due course. I am among the so-called public leaders in this situation, I think, if I'm not wrong. In Bangladesh, we have a community of public leaders as anywhere in the world. And I have a little space here also. So I'm highly curious, inquisitive. I'm interested to learn from discussions from our scholars and academics about a very important issue which impacts our life. Upon post-pandemic post-pandemic world following the COVID-19 disruptions. Like anywhere else in the world, Bangladesh was highly impacted, although I would take pride in saying that our handling has been better than average globally in terms of numbers that have been scored until now. We take much pleasure in recording that our very comparably weaker institutions, particularly in the field of health, and of course, with that governance also, you could say, we were quite sort of concerned at the initial stage how we would be able to face it. And of course, we were also concerned about the global response to the issue. Initially, at least, when the medical discoveries or responses were not being fairly shared and distributed all over the world. As we lack in research, as we lack in medical research and medical outputs in facing these situations, we were highly concerned, and there were dire predictions by people here in Bangladesh and elsewhere how we would face it. Mercifully, and with strong leadership among our senior public leaders, particularly the head of the government, Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, we have, I hope you will kindly agree when you discuss these matters, you'll see the positive points that we've been able to handle it fairly well. So in that backdrop, the other issue which is of concern to you today, that of governance, which is a matter of concern for us also, improving, strengthening governance across the society. You will address the interaction between the two issues in the post-pandemic world. We in the government would like to hear from you, learn from you, and remain better prepared in the coming emergencies like this. As the scholars and scientists have already warned, it's likely that we'll have more such events, if not COVID-19, COVID something else, or some other issues will likely emerge in the due course, in due course in future. So for public leaders who are in the driving seat, would have to take responsibility for the outcome, would have to take responsibility for shaping strategies to address these very important issues. It's a very important opportunity for us to hear from you scholars across the globe, to learn from you. Professor Irol D'Souza from IIM Ahmedabad mentioned about the crisis of governance in his language, which of course, you're right, I think. There is a perception across in the general public that there are issues of governance we need to be addressed, because this also has a impact on the other issues of life, including pandemic-related issues and issues of economic rebuilding or economic recovery, which has been very negatively impacted by COVID-19. Professor D'Souza has mentioned, has expressed his optimism that in the long run, and I fully agree with him, I'm an optimist by nature, things will improve and rebound. But the cost meanwhile, particularly the short-term cost, will have to be taken into consideration, because the present generation, people who are living today and making their livelihoods, for them these are very important issues, because they have a very limited lifespan in front of them. So short-term cost is something that we need to take into consideration. I'm sure scholars here today, tomorrow, and the day after will also shed light on these issues and will leave something for us to take home, sit down and learn from them also. I would have loved to hear Dr. Devapriya's presentation in full. I still have about 20 minutes left for me, so I'll be around. I'll hear him, and then if you would kindly allow me, maybe I'll make a quiet departure without any noise to join my other event at Press Club. So ladies and gentlemen, all of you, thank you very much. NSU has been very kind host to me for over the years. I am not an academic in the sense of the term correctly, but you consider me fit to be in your company, and that's a great honor for me. Thank you once again. Thank you very much. Jai Bangla.
Thank you, sir, for this wonderful speech. Now I would like to invite Dr. Debopriyo Bhattacharya, Distinguished Fellow of Center for Policy Dialogue, Bangladesh, to deliver the inaugural speech.
একটু কনফারেন্সে আছি পরে কথা বলি।
Thank you. Najiba, please hold on before I get into the colleagues. Good evening, good afternoon, and good morning to all of you. Honorable Minister, Mr. M.M. Mannan, I think he is the perfect public leader at this moment and a most suitable chief guest for the occasion. The Honorable Chair of the session, Professor Atiqul Islam, Vice Chancellor of the North-South University, another very kind host. And I have been pleased to listen to Dr. Angel Wright Lanier, Professor Errol D'Souza, and of course, Mr. Azimuddin Ahmed, the Chair of the Board of Trustees of North-South University. And I would also like to recognize the presence of all the colleagues from the North-South University. It is Mr. Salahuddin Aminuzaman who persuaded me to be here today, but I also see many of the friendly faces. That's good to see on a Friday morning, which is a weekend in Dhaka at this moment. And I see that we are already working overtime in the post-pandemic era. That's very encouraging. When I was asked to talk about this, provide an inaugural speech to this session, which is essentially a multi-country, cross-disciplinary gathering, I wondered what to talk about. But then I thought that this would be an occasion for me, based on the work I had been doing for the last 2 years on the impact of COVID in Bangladesh and also in Global South, to have a closer look at the South Asian experience. But the experience is quite varied and it is quite rich in many ways from the policy perspective, particularly for the public leaders. And here, Mr. Chair, Honorable Minister, the public leader for me is that, of course, the public representatives to start with, the various kinds of, starting from the local government to the members of parliament, but also the officials who exercise executive power. And at the same time, I also consider there are public leaders as non-state actors, which are from the civil society as the public and also the policy analysts, experts, and scholars. So I do take a broader view about the public leaders in these cases, and they have a different types of constituency and different types of roles to dispense with, but they're all mutually complementary, and together we make a good country in many ways. So it's my unique privilege to address such a gathering with a set of general observation based on the empirics of the last 2 years. The point is that when I tried to generalize these lessons, I was reminded of one of the sayings of my great-grandmother. She said that never say more than 3 issues, because the people will never remember the 4th one. So I wondered how many issues should I take there. Then I recalled that this is possibly the most erudite gathering I have ever seen. So maybe they will be able to absorb the double the normal average. So I came to you with 6 lessons instead of 3. So excuse me for that. So Najiba, let's go to the panels, to the PowerPoint now. And I take this opportunity, of course, to thank the NASPAA for the South Asia conference and to invite me. I see the South Asian Institute of Policy and Governance of the North-South University, as well as the Jindal School of Public Policy at the IIM Ahmedabad together in this exercise, and I want to congratulate them. So let's set the scene first. So set the scene. Incidents, the minister has already alluded to some of the issues. Let me put it the numbers. I have put before you two tables here on the incidence of infection and the vaccine coverage. And they're both, they're in comparable to put them. The first one on the incidence rate, you will see in terms of percentages and the per 100,000 population, or the vaccination also percentage of the fully vaccinated in the South Asian countries. Have a look among the countries. If you see the least affected or the possibly the most managed incidence of infection had been Bhutan. It's only 0.3%, and the death rate was 0.4%. To what extent it was because it was a landlocked country and the infection did not spread very much, or to what extent it was the public policy which was gave that kind of fantastic result, it is to be seen. But if you look at the countries, which was also very isolated country, like Maldives, the incidence was much more higher. So the logic of isolation, to what extent it occurs, is to be seen. And the death rates was much, much higher, possibly one of the highest, followed by Sri Lanka. So you see that Sri Lanka and Maldives are the two outliers in terms of infection rates now within South Asia. And Bhutan obviously scores the best. And all other countries, and I won't really talk about Afghanistan because it is totally an aberration currently. And so you will see India, Bangladesh, Nepal, Pakistan will somewhere fall in between. So when Mr. Mannan, the Honorable Minister, says we are moderately managed it, he is perfectly correct, because we are somewhere in between Bhutan and on the other extreme, Maldives and Sri Lanka. So the other interesting part is that, is there a connection between the infection rate and the death rate and the rate of vaccination? Here again, very interestingly, Bhutan tops the whole score. Please keep on the other one, then I will come to this. So you see this, the Bhutan vaccination rate is 72 points, almost 73%. And interestingly, Maldives with the high vaccination rate still had the highest death rate. So here we need to look into beyond vaccination, what are the other factors which could have really led to this kind of situation in Maldives, or for that matter in Sri Lanka, because Sri Lanka also had a high vaccination rate. But here, how the vaccination was rolled out, it is also an issue, that it is that how not at the beginning, maybe at towards the end. So let's put the next one, the scatter diagram. In this scatter diagram, I tried to compare the infection rates and the death rates against the vaccination, infection rate and the vaccination coverage. You will see Bhutan comes out on the top, which essentially means higher the vaccination, lower the infection rate. But we also have Maldives on the other extreme, where you will see higher vaccination, but also higher vaccination and higher death rate. So Bhutan on the one extreme with the high vaccination and low death rate, and Maldives with the higher vaccination, high death rate. And you see Afghanistan at the bottom, that you have low vaccination and high death rate in this case. And you will see in the scattered diagram, India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, they're in the middle on the side, as you will see. So that's a very interesting relationship or an association. Statistician will contest me if I say relationship, and I am not implying any causality here, but I'm just showing you the relationship over here. Let's move to the next one. So lesson number one. What is the lesson number one? Public policies actors need to remember that nowadays all national issues are global anyway. There is hardly any national issue which doesn't have a global dimension. And COVID is a classical case in point. The cross-border dimensions of COVID-19, I mentioned only 5, could have gone more. One is the virus spreading. It started in one country possibly, and it came to all over the world. You access to vaccine, whether it is a gift or a purchase or through the COVAX, it has the global dimension. The world is now rife with the discussion of vaccine politics, both in manufacturing and distribution. The third is the global travel shutdown. That is the movement of people. It was affected both with the coming and outing. And supply chain disruption, movement of food, not food, sorry. It is the goods and services. Well, not all goods are food and services. And finally, the closure of the markets and the labor markets. And Bangladesh knows better that because of the migrant workers came back to our countries. So first and foremost lesson for our public leaders, that don't treat a national issue in a circumspect way that it is only national. Always please look at how the global systemic concerns are reflected in our national deliberations in whatever way, whether it's the production of goods, services, or movement of natural people, or we are accessing products or particularly health-related materials when it concerns COVID-19. That would be my first lesson. Let's move the second one. The second one, which had been already alluded to by this, the opening speakers, the socio-economic impact of the pandemic disproportionately fell on the left behind people. When I said the left behind people, I'm talking about the traditionally disadvantaged people. In my earlier study, I have tried to identify who are the disadvantaged people. It is in case of Bangladesh or for the global south, coming from the point of view of their vulnerability. And you see this point of view, the vulnerability of these disadvantaged people. This includes the life cycle phenomena, whether they are senior citizens or they are young children. It includes the locational phenomena, whether they are remotely located people without proper access, connectivity, starting from multimodal transport system to internet and others. It may be also related to occupations, when the occupations are quite often hazardous or underpaid, low skill, low productivity, and others. It may come from the income level. They are by nature low income earning people. And it may come from gender, women in particular, transgender, the others, but also comes with the low level of education, physical disability, and most importantly, civil identity, ethnic, religious minorities, and many other issues. So the interesting part is that whereas the whole country was affected, but some people were more affected than the others. What is important also in this respect that to note that whilst there had been this left behind people in our countries, but then this pandemic has pushed behind some people, those who had not been the traditionally disadvantaged group. Who are these people? We identify through our studies that's pushed those people who have been pushed behind. They're essentially the low middle income people who have been disengaged from their regular source of income and did not have social protection means and were not privy to the government support system in these cases. So the second lesson is that whilst we deal with the effect, but we need to take a disaggregated look at where there are some people who were more affected than the others. These people who had been more affected than the others, had there been opportunity, I would have shown, they may vary from country to country. In some countries, it may be the remotely located people. On the other country, it may be the migrant workers. In other cases, it may be the physically challenged people located in remote places or in unaccounted families. Interestingly, these vulnerabilities do not come alone. There is multiple vulnerability, and we also see overlapping vulnerability in these cases when we look at this left behind people disproportionately affected by this pandemic. Lesson number 3. The lesson number 3, let me go to the next slide. The public policy, which was engineered in response to the pandemic, most of the governments across South Asia did have stimulus packages rolled out at very early stage. So you will see that most of these government generated or designed a stimulus package, and they were trying to reach out to the affected people in this case. Now, the point I make here, the ability to roll out a stimulus package is dependent on the fiscal space available to each of these countries. So fiscal space would mean that the government is the government's ability to spend income or its resources or its revenues, or it's borrowed, it can be its own or be borrowed for these emergency programs. Now, I have, as an economist, very faithfully, I have put together a macroeconomic table. So where you see the public expenditure share of the GDP, the revenue share of the GDP, and the fiscal deficit of the GDP as a share of GDP for these respective 7 countries. And do have a look, and you'll see that in a very peculiar way, Afghanistan has, of course, 27% higher at percentage of GDP as Bhutan has the. I won't talk about Afghanistan because it confuses the picture, because there's money, what you see is essentially foreign money. The Bhutan has the highest, public expenditure ratio, 27%, and its revenue ratio is also highest amongst the South Asian countries, and it has the lowest fiscal deficit as well. And if you look at the stimulus packages table on the right side, the size of the stimulus package as a share of GDP, you will see that Bhutan rolled out the single largest share of GDP in terms of the stimulus package, almost 18%. The point I make is that there is a high association between your ability to collect revenue, your ability to spend those good money, and maintain a low fiscal balance, deficit, good fiscal balance, would have allowed us, the respective countries, to spend more for stimulus packages. And you'll see that it is true for Bhutan. It is also partly true for India, because this, India is showing the second lowest fiscal deficit. It's a federal deficit we are talking about, the central deficit, because India is a federal state, it has other issues. So that association is quite clear. And if you see Pakistan with possibly with the highest fiscal deficit, almost 9% of the GDP, had the lowest fiscal stimulus package rolled out. I'm dealing with a number which relates to May 2020. So there may be others, and it is essentially during the first phase of the COVID. So that's I think a caveat I need to mention. So that is my third issue, that the public expenditure system or the public finance management system had a critical role to play in terms of defining the package, this magnitude of the package which we rolled out in our respective countries. I want to dwell with this issue a bit more. Please move. So you see the association. It is the lower axis on the horizontal axis is negative, so it is on the left side. And you will see that Bhutan again shows up on the top with the high association between fiscal deficit and size of the stimulus package in this case. And Pakistan on the other extreme, you will see with the high fiscal deficit and low stimulus package in this case. Again, I am not implying any causality here. I am only showing the association of two sets of numbers. I do not have adequate numbers to run a regression and find out the level, the robustness of this association. Maybe someday we will do that. Let's move on to this public policy on rolled out to combat with the pandemic fallouts. Next one. So the fourth lesson coming from the public policy is that absence of most of these countries do not have, I think not most, all the countries do not have universal social protection scheme. And since it did not have social protection scheme, even with those public policy interventions, with the government stimulus packages, this has left people, citizens, communities vulnerable to the pandemic. So it did not really sort out its problem in many ways. So what is the situation? But we do not, all these countries, while they do not have universal social protection scheme, or it may not have basic minimum income, but or universal pension scheme, they do have some kind of social safety net programs in different countries in different forms. So in the lower table, you will see that I put what share of the populations have been covered by different types of social protection scheme or safety nets, whether it's children or the mothers, or whether it's unemployment, which is absent, work-related injury, disability, old age pensions, contribution to pension fund, and other vulnerabilities. But look at the numbers in terms of the coverages of social protections in South Asian countries. Very interestingly, on the top of it is Sri Lanka, followed by Bangladesh. Sri Lanka has 36% coverage, Bangladesh has more than 24% of the person coverage, and India 24%. So it is very interesting to relate now the social protection schemes to the fiscal deficit situation and to the infection and the mortality rate or vaccination. We see Sri Lanka, notwithstanding its good social protection and its medium type of fiscal deficit, still managed to get more people in a vulnerable situation and died over there. But they could really pick up sooner in terms of vaccination. So, but at the same time, if you look at those who are in the middle, it is India and Bangladesh. They have really held the situation at a moderate level from the very beginning and thereafter. And also the Maldives with its relative and Nepal with its low over there. So it's a mixed picture, I must say. It's a mixed picture that to what extent the social, the safety net programs were effective in terms of giving protection to these people, vulnerable people, left behind people, and to what extent it was related to vaccination and rolling out of the stimulus package over there. But the point I make, that absence of a universal social protection really left them a bit vulnerable. What are the overall general critiques about the stimulus packages which were rolled out in all these countries? This is a generalized comment based on the 6 countries. Afghanistan, as I said, is not very much relevant at this moment. The first and foremost is low allocation. The highest allocation, what we saw was 6-8% on that, and the lowest was less than 2 or 3%. These are nowhere near the trillions of dollars spent by the larger countries in Europe and United States of America. So the allocation had been relatively modest. But so the second point is that these allocations had a high credit bias. These were based more on monetary policy instruments, less on fiscal policy instruments. Fiscal policy would mean direct cash transfer and also food assistance underwritten by the government, free food assistance. If you look at the packages in all these countries, you will see it had been dominated by the subsidized interest rate provided by the government. I call them the hybrid measures because it has the fiscal element, because the government gives the subsidies into the interest rate. So it is quasi-fiscal in certain ways, but there are also the other credit. And we know the problem with the credit because these are the poorest of the poor. They do not have access to banking system and many others. And the small and medium enterprises could not access the money properly. And the utilization rate is pretty low in these cases. So the lesson is that we need to, in the absence of any social protection scheme, universal social protection scheme, we need to have more direct cash transfers and food assistance in this case. The other problem was that it missed out the new poor. It talked about whatever support mechanisms were given out, it was directed to the traditional poor and the vulnerables. Whereas the new middle class, which lost their job, particularly the informal sector workers and entrepreneurs, and those who had been in the service sector because of the lockdown, lost their jobs, and had a decent living till the pandemic came in, they were the new vulnerables in all the countries, as we know. There was exclusion and duplication of targets because some of the poor people got more than once, no doubt about that. And then there were others exclusion in that sense, if they were not listed and if the local governments did not properly work, the central government did allocate, but it may not have reached them in certain cases. So the exclusion and duplication issue is quite critical. And I will relate this exclusion and duplication issue to the absence of data support. Because in order to identify these people and to give them the proper support, we would need their number, their address, their telephone numbers, and NIDs. I have written elsewhere the data innovation which has gone on in Bangladesh, which is tremendous, starting from I will come to that, one of my lessons on the data issue. And that had been, the inadequate data support had been a major hindrance in this case. And my last comment is that the low attention during second wave. The first wave got quite a lot of attention. And you will see the rollout of the supports and etc. had been tremendous in the cases. In case of Bangladesh, our first incidents were located on 8th of March, and by 14th and 15th of March, the government was rolling out, and the Prime Minister gave a very substantive guidance in terms of, on 4 points, how the support mechanism would be, where public expenditure figured, where the direct support figured, where the support to the private sector figured, and also pushing in more liquidity into the system, which was there. But we see the waning of the attention in the second wave, and I wonder if there is a third wave, whether we will make business as usual or not. Fifth lesson. The fifth lesson is the pandemic has spurred data innovation. This is the positive side of the thing. Here I mentioned Bangladesh. The Shurakha app is a fantastic thing, which unthinkably has really organized the portal, organized the the registration, administration of doses, the management of the vaccination doses, and generated real-time data. If anybody who have told us 3 years back that Bangladeshis with its level of IT literacy would be using Shurakha app to get their vaccination, I think cynical people like me would have laughed away. But today, I think we need to swallow our words and smiles, and we have to accept that it has proven to be quite good. It was not only in Bangladesh. Look at Bhutan vaccine system, BVS. It also did all these monitoring, stock, registration, vaccination certificates, and real-time reports. If you look at India, the COVID vaccine intelligent work, CoWIN as it is called, is the same. It's a cloud-based one. And you look at Pakistan, the National Immunization Management System, NIMS, and you look at Sri Lanka, the District Health Information Software 2, DIHS. So in all the South Asian countries, the pandemic has pushed forward the the awareness about data, the ability to master the local technologies or local expertise to prepare this kind of soft apps and do data management and etc. etc. It is far from perfect. It's far from perfect, but I think we need to give credit to our colleagues for this kind of thing, and also the public leaders for rising up to the occasion, up to a point, in recognizing the importance of data in this case. And this is beyond our national statistical agencies which are going to do that. It is now a challenge in front of us how to create a central data repository with proper safety and security legal protection, and how we do the interoperability, link it to the macro data framework in the BPS. My last lesson over here. My last lesson is that regional cooperation, I mentioned about the global issues, I come to the regional cooperation. Regional cooperation can play a supportive role in dealing with the national issues. The COVID has once again shows us that. But whether in case of Bangladesh it was good enough or not, or in case of other countries good enough or not, I leave it for the posterity to judge. So let me give you some evidence on this. The first, on 15th of March 2020, the Indian Prime Minister convened a meeting of the South Asian countries. All the prime ministers of South Asia, Bangladesh, our Prime Minister, Bhutan, Nepal, Maldives, and the President of Sri Lanka got into the call. And from Pakistan, it was the State Minister who represented Pakistan in that. So that was one of the political initiative very early at the stage the South Asian leaders took. And they took this initiative in the absence of a functioning SARC mechanism, because SARC remains in comatose, we all know that. So this was also an initiative. What are the issues over here? On the finance, you see there is a SARC finance framework back in April 2020, and $2 billion were mobilized under that. And if you see $150 million and $400 million was doled out to Maldives and Sri Lanka. Each of the countries contributed in that to have the liquidity available in this case. So the SARC finance framework came into existence. Then the leaders put together the SARC COVID-19 emergency fund. It is $2.8 million. And India was the first one to contribute $10 million out of the 2.18. Bangladesh was the second largest contributor in this case. And then the emergency fund is there. They are supposed to spend this money in their respective areas in this country. The SARC Development Fund, which is an old one, back in April 2020, it mobilized $5 billion over there. But beyond finance, I think the South Asian cooperation also to be looked into in new areas, the new innovation which we have seen. It was unthinkable till the other day that a country like Bangladesh would be extending foreign exchange support to another high middle income country. And that's what Bangladesh did to Sri Lanka. So the Bangladesh, the currency swap with Sri Lanka of 200, now it's going up more than $200 million, is an extraordinary case of regional solidarity and what we have done. So we are redefining the South-South cooperation. In order to be a South-South cooperation provider, you don't need to be very high income economies. You can have opportunities to do more. Medical aid from India to Bangladesh, medical aid from Pakistan to Bangladesh, medical aid from Bangladesh to India. So, and also I would have added that how Bangladesh sold PPE, the personal protection equipments to America, United States of America. Mr. Pompeo at that time saying that was a great milestone of global international cooperation with a country like Bangladesh providing support to a country like United States of America. So it is not only the data, but also it is a case of how the regional cooperation also took shape in these cases. The vaccine supply from India is a classical case of regional cooperation in this case. Have a look at the numbers. Indian vaccine, the serum, notwithstanding the disruption we had supply from India to Bangladesh, notwithstanding the fact that we had prepaid the supplies we didn't have, nonetheless, you will see the supply situation, how it stands. I have put them in the three heads, the grant, the commercial purchase, and the COVAX, you know, the international COVAX scheme, which gives to low-income countries free vaccines. So you see the highest, in this case, the highest beneficiary of this had been Bangladesh. And of course, the commercial purchase has been the dominant form. It is the 7 million in that way, 3.3 as grant, and then the COVAX. But also you will see in total, this will end up into 15 million doses or something like that. And most of the countries, other than Afghanistan, have had access to the Indian vaccine in many ways. So we had till the other day we thought of trade in goods and services, investments, education, but we really didn't see so much of the medical related activities in certain ways. The regional cooperation came out in strongly, but since the borders were closed, the travel were shut down. So there was limits to which you could do regional cooperation. And we have seen later how India has come to Bangladesh with oxygen supply, liquid oxygen and other things through the road transport when it was partially open. But was it enough? I look at the African experience, I don't put, and I show you how they have, in terms of numbers, have done better than ours. Look at the Africa Development Bank initiative, the COVID response facility, $10 billion. The bond social loan is $3 billion. Emergency assistance, which they have given to WHO, the UN system, is $2 million. And you had the joint continental strategy. We didn't have a joint continental strategy. We didn't have a joint regional strategy. Development Bank of Central Africa, $5 million. You see and they have set up new facilities in terms of accessing finance, the emergency credit line, the other things. The Inter-American Bank, the Latin American one, and they bought out $3 billion. So you see the regional joint initiatives, the SADC, the South African Development Procurements, the Development Cooperation, and West African Development Bank. The number is almost 200 million. So what I'm trying to say, the South Asia, notwithstanding the fact we do not have a political structure or a functional regional cooperation structure, we did not bad, but it is far away from the other region which have done much better in countries like Africa, Latin America, and elsewhere. So let me now summarize. I think that would be a good thing to do. I will fall back on my grandmother's, great-grandmother's advice, not more than 3 summary points, so that you can take them home. My first and foremost point, that the pandemic has exposed that how poor public health infrastructure we have. The weak public health infrastructure and very limited access to basic needs, because we do not have as I said, fiscal transfer programs beyond the targeted fiscal transfer program for traditional, very poor, ultra poor, or disadvantaged people. And there is no social protection system, universal social protection. We do have safety nets and other things. So this is an issue which we have been, for the policy actors, for the minister in particular, that we have been arguing for a universal social protection scheme. And today I also add that it is time to think through for a basic minimum income for all citizens of Bangladesh. I mentioned that to the minister earlier, that whether we could have had this universal social protection scheme dedicated to the 50 years of our independence in Bangladesh, or 100th year of Bangabandhu's birth anniversary. This would have been a perfect tribute. I think we have still the opportunity, think through about it. Basic, and this time to move to basic minimum income. Technical analysis will show to have a basic minimum income, you don't need very high income per capita, although we already have crossed the $2,500 per capita income threshold. My second point is that for the recovery and future growth, the climate issue has been mentioned. We need to use a framing issue agenda, which is the Sustainable Development Goals. The 2030 agenda, the Sustainable Development Goals, can be a good framework for devising the recovery and also the rebound of our respective areas, because it is not only the economy, but it is all the health, education, social protection, and also because on goal number 16, the issue of rule of law, the human rights, the strong institutions, these are all very important. And also goal number 17, where we talk about partnerships and other things over there. So my, the request to you, please consider SDGs as a good framing approach for your national policies and also for others. My last point is that there are some locked regional issues we now have come to know. I call it locked in issues because you cannot get away from it. South Asian countries cannot get away from it without cooperating among themselves. There are issues which we can solve all by ourselves, but there are issues which we cannot solve if we do not get the cross-border cooperation. What are these issues? Public health is now on the top of the agenda in many ways. Climate action, that is also another way. Pollution cannot be really taken care of without regional cooperation. And migration as well, whether it is legal or it is organized, and migration of various forms, trafficking, both in women and children and other things, and also the spillovers of drug and safety, security, terrorism, and also connectivity, multimodal transport system, and finance and other things are very much necessary. If we do not cooperate on these lines in the future, we will be having suboptimal solutions in our respective national economy. So those are the issues I wanted to bring to you in today's morning. I know that you may have many more lessons, all those. There are many sub-lessons to each of them. Some lessons are more valid for one country than the other. But today morning, I thought I will, either roll out what was in my mind and share it with this very erudite and competent gathering and get some feedback if possible. Thank you very much, Mr. Minister, for staying over. Thank you, North-South University, NASPAA, and also the Jindal School for giving me this unique opportunity to be with you this morning. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Devupriyo, for a very informative and wonderful presentation. And this is setting the stage for the next 3 days. I'm sure there will be lots of discussion in and around those issues that you have mentioned. We have few minutes in our hand for question, answers, or comments. I'm not sure still we are happy that the minister is with us. Honorable Minister, do you have any observation or comments? We can start with you. And yes, you are muted, sir.
Oh, yeah, okay. No. All I have to do is thank you for this good gathering, and thanks Dr. Devapri Bhattacharya for another description of state of affairs here. Particularly our regional picture has been put up to us. That's something very live and very current, and that's I would appreciate that scholars and academics here in the next 3 days, when they discuss this regional aspect, is kept in sight in our own interest, so that we learn from them. And of course, I once again thank North South for another milestone in their creative work, and I hope more such will come in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. So if any other participants of the conference do want to have any comments or give any or have any questions to Dr. Devapri, you can just
maybe Mr. Ranjan wants to put his question in the chat.
Yeah, in the chat box, please. Yeah, Professor Nuruzzaman. Yes, please unmute yourself, Professor Zaman. Unmute yourself, Professor Nuruzzaman. Unmute yourself.
Okay. Assalamu alaikum and thank you, and good morning to everybody. And I especially thank all the participants joining this special conference today. I have a question about the presentation by Dr. Devapri Bhattacharya. He in fact elaborated all important issues relating to the pandemic, how the pandemic was managed in the South Asian context. I would like to draw his attention to the international organizations support, particularly the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, and other support from the European Union. If you could please highlight on these issues in the management of this COVID-19 pandemic in South Asia. That would be fine. And thank you so much for giving me the opportunity.
Okay, we may take some more 2 or 3 questions or comments, and then probably we'll go back to Dr. Devapri.
I'm Wahiduzaman.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, Wahiduzaman, Professor of Political Science and Public Management at Austin Peay State University, Clarksville, Tennessee, USA. This paper was well presented, the speech was well presented and all that. But I want to add what he said. There is total absence of, in the curriculum at the school level, university level, even for public administration scholars, even for training programs, emergency management. There is total absence. So all South Asian countries, especially Bangladesh, should include course curricula for emergency management, hazard mitigation, disaster preparedness, emergency response, and disaster recovery. Even the mainstream public administration programs under NASPAA, where I did my PhD in Kent State, there was a total absence of any emergency management course. Good thing, ASPA, American Society for Public Administration, has a good chapter on emergency management. In Bangladesh, for that matter, even in India, public administrators were unprepared, underprepared, not prepared at all to deal with emergency management. They do not know the difference between hazard, emergency, the programs, recovery programs got all mixed up. Even the developed countries are underprepared. So time has come to think about designing, implementing, executing good programs, emergency management programs. There are plenty of examples. Planning minister, once upon a time, I knew him. He's from economics department. He attended, I think, good public school. And so I'm very glad to see him. He's the planning minister. So we expect that this kind of curriculum management is the better answer, not haphazard way. Bangladesh was not prepared. India was not prepared, and we have seen it. So time has come to change the curriculum of training programs at BPTC and other training institutes, including public administration programs. So my request is that Dr. Dev to think about including that. Let us see, cooperate and coordinate with each other. That's how to better manage the crisis management, hazard management. So emergency management is the right answer.
Thank you so much. Very good, important, and a very important observation indeed. I can see another hand. Can you please Oppo A53? I don't know, the name is not seen.
Yes, this is Rajiv Ranjan.
Oh, Rajiv, please carry on, Rajiv.
Yeah. So I'm a faculty at Alliance University, India. Thank you, Dr. Debapriya, for a very wonderful presentation. And the way you define public leaders and very broadly was very, very interesting. And you said that SDGs is very important, and you referred to SDG 3, the public health aspect of it is of primordial importance, and its lack of it in the Bangladesian context. And availability of it probably in the medical health infrastructure, probably in the Indian context, is quite good. And a lot of medical tourism is happening, was happening earlier also to India from a lot of our South Asian neighbors. But how it was being planned is something, and the demographics of it is what needs to be looked at. In times of crisis, we start thinking about that only the basic needs is something what we need to focus on. But we start thinking about luxury in other points in time. So this is what differentiates and creates crises in other points in time. So I would like to ask you that these inequalities, health inequalities and other kinds of inequalities, do we not only create these inequalities in some sense? When there are no crises, we think health and all these aspects as something to be a luxury. Because there are other people at that point in time also who do not have access. And we are taking medical tourism as some kind of a luxury. It is a tourism.
Yeah. Thank you, Rajiv. I think it's well taken. The question is there anyone else want to ask any question or having any comment?
May I ask a question?
Yeah, please, Professor Abdul Rab Khan.
Yeah, although we are talking about, thank you very much, Professor Tawfiq, for this wonderful arrangement and also the excellent presentation by Dr. Debapriya Bhattacharya. Although we are talking about South Asia, I think we cannot avoid the context of role or the absence of China in South Asian COVID situation. I think, would you like to be on that issue?
Okay, thank you. I think we have now we can close the open session. I just had one question, getting the privilege of being the moderator of this question answer. So this there are lots of discussion going on regarding vaccine politics in the global stage as well as a regional stage, and we are seeing that this vaccine has become economic kind of a product. Even though there are lots of discussion, the head of the states there in the international stages they are talking about is a kind of a general public goods rather than a commercial good. But we are seeing that pharmaceutical companies' role and many of the European, American or the other countries, they are also seeing it from a different perspective. So if you can just shed a little bit light about the overall politics and economy of the vaccine also. So over to you, Dr. Debapriya.
Thank you very much. Now at this stage of my career, I have understood that, giving a good question is sometimes much more difficult than giving a good answer. So I got 4 very good questions or 4 very good issues on the table. And I'm pretty sure those in these cases, as it happens, that the person who really thought through and provided the question has possibly the best possible answer in these cases. And that had been also partly true. Now, let me take these 4 issues, or 5 rather, now with the chair adding 1. The first and foremost is about the role of the international organization in these cases. My study on the role of the international organization during the pandemic in Bangladesh, I can say that we have seen within the international development cooperation, the heightened role of the IFIs, the international financial institutions. And when I see Bangladesh mobilized almost $2 billion over this 1.5 years. So there was no dearth of foreign exchange flow in that sense from the international organization. I make two distinctions in the international organization. Earlier, you see in the question, Mr. Nuruzaman mentioned that the World Bank, IMF, and others. So 3 points. The first point is there had been not only the traditional IFIs, but the new thing we have found in this new pandemic situation, and that relates partly to Rob Bhai's question, Dr. Abdul Rob's question on China, that we have found Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank was one of the predominant providers of finance in South Asia. Into Bangladesh, the first loan came, and to other parts of the region. And you know, AIIB is a Chinese creation or promoted organization. So the first thing is that we saw emergence of the non-traditional international financial organization alongside with IMF, World Bank. Number two, on that is that beyond the IMF, World Bank, we have seen heightened role of the regional banks. Asian Development Bank possibly had been more active than the other international bank organization in case of Asia. And that we see African Development Bank and also the Inter-American Development Bank in Latin America. This is two. The third one is that the traditional banks, what they have done, they have opened up their old windows, the traditional windows of concessional finance, but they also created new windows of financing, what they call rapid response facilities. Both IMF and World Bank and others have also used rapid response facilities, which will cut through all the requirements for doing feasibility and other things before lending out. And their board of management also shortcut the decision-making processes as it has done. So, and they have the third, what they have done, they have reoriented the existing programs and made them pandemic, enabled. For example, they had a youth program, they converted the youth program into a post-COVID youth program. They had the health program, they converted that one into much more COVID-oriented health program, and et cetera, et cetera. So what was absent in the international development cooperation is the role of the bilateral, the traditional bilateral OECD countries, because they themselves were seized with the pandemic and they had to cut, they had a contraction in their economy, cut down in their allocation to the foreign aid, and et cetera, et cetera. So you see heightened role of international financial organization with new role of the southern institutions adapting to the new realities and flowing money. And so there is no less complaint, but we didn't see the traditional role of the bilaterals, but they themselves were in problem. That would be my first response to you. And for Bangladesh, it had been quite lucky in terms of getting the international liquidity. The second one on the issue of the emergency enabled curriculum system. So I didn't get your full name, Dr. Zaman, I understand.
Wahiduzaman. Wahiduzaman.
Wahiduzaman. Dr. Wahiduzaman, your question is fine. And you mentioned that Bangladesh was not ready. I give back a question to you. Was the world ready for this?
Absolutely
so,
not.
My question, possible. So it is not a Bangladesh issue. So the world was not ready for this. If you go back to Bangladesh experience, so if you see as we graduate from the LDC group, and one of the criteria, incidentally, I seen in the UN committee which decides on the LDC group. So one is the vulnerability criteria. And within the vulnerability criteria is number of people who have perished due to disasters. Now, for us, till the other day, disaster was the natural disaster. The health disaster was not very much in the lexicon. Bangladesh has done tremendously well in managing natural disasters. The rate of, the casualty has come down tremendously. We all know that. It is all because that emergency response has been institutionalized, because the standard operating procedures in case of natural disaster has now been decentralized. And it is the district administration and the downwards and how to bring in the people and the Red Cross and etc. has been all been detailed out. What you are saying is totally a new area. And I think that your advice is very well taken, and the respective people will respond to it and adapt our curriculum to that. So I'm not, I'm fully with you on the question, but I would say this is not only Bangladesh, poor Bangladesh or South Asia. It's the world was unprepared for this kind of things. On the third issue, on SDG 3 and the issue of the medical tourism and other things, what has really shown us, you may think that India has a better public health infrastructure than many others. Sri Lanka has possibly the much better one. But the fact of the matter is that we have tested the limits of this public health infrastructure during the pandemic. We have seen how people really could not get ICUs or access to high-flowing oxygen, even in the best possible circumstances, because of the concentration of the high demand on certain period of time for certain people. So I think the issue is that whether we can manage the peak situation or not, and number two, whether we can make it available to the lowest common denominator, to the most left behind people for those kind of things. This infrastructure sometimes are there in the community level, sometimes it is not. So I think we need to understand that however we may feel good about that Bangladesh is going to India for medical tourism, it doesn't mean that the medical situation in India by itself is good enough to withstand this kind of shocks and also for its own left behind people. I think we need to think a bit more cohesively in this case. And I would like to mention that health entitlement does not come only from the supply side. The entitlement factor also comes with the endowment of the people who are accessing it. So it comes along with the ability to pay. When the 60–70% our ability to our health expenditure are off-pocket expenditure. The government, however good facility they provide, 2/3 of it is coming from the pocket. And the endowment of that is totally limited to certain sections of people over there. So, but I am with you on that, your emphasis on SDG 3 and the way you look at it and the cross-breeding between the SDG and cross-border SDG 3 and the cross-border issues. And I do think that we need to have a much more joint health strategy in the region now in order to deal with this. On the fourth issue, this was the third issue. I think the fourth issue is Dr. Rob's question on the China. This is an issue is that China in the bull shop or the bull in the China shop. So the issue is that obviously China is an important provider of vaccines in Bangladesh. And I have already mentioned the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank's role. And vaccine now, Sinopharma is a predominant source over there. Whether this Sinopharma is globally recognized or not, and how and why, you will also have to see how those who are going abroad are shying away from taking Sinopharma vaccines, and they're going for Pfizer, Moderna, and also Serum. So it is also to be seen that this is part of the global vaccine politics, essentially, Dr. Tawfiq, that the part of the global politics that which we recognize, which we don't recognize. And till the other day, which was produced in Europe was recognized, but the same thing done by Serum, India has problem with the European Union getting the recognition and outside, whereas the other countries outside European Union was fully recognizing those, the effectiveness of those issues. So the China will be an important source for, I won't say that it will be an important source for the infection, but I would definitely say an important source for the vaccines in many ways, and also other types of support to build resilience of that. And China is an important international development partners in Bangladesh in the current situation. So China is an important factor. Dr. Rob has perfectly mentioned it over there. My last point on the issue of the vaccine politics. I think vaccine politics runs, I think, on three, on the, if you look at the value chain or the product cycle. So it starts from the manufacturing, or rather even you step back on research and development expenditures in pharmaceuticals. with high investments, with high risks, but very high return. So this was a time for them to really reap the money in certain ways. The issue is that whether we have the second point is that how do you really sell or procure at what price? Whether it will be a regulated market or not, that was the second point which was there. And if not, whether you will subsidize the procurement in certain cases and do that. And third is that whether we have the licensing procedure or the reverse engineering procedures to manufacture those cases with joint production agreements in different cases. And fourth is that whether the global public goods theory will come into existence through the COVAX mechanism. You know, in the COVAX, many important countries have contributed. Gates Foundation be the single largest providers over there. It is again coming from the private sector, not from the public. And many countries have shied away till date. And this is COVAX is possibly the best possible, global effort in terms of providing the vaccines to other countries. And last but not the least, this vaccine in the product cycle, it starts with the research and development, but it does not end up with utilization, because this is a medicine for which post-vaccination surveillance is no less important than the vaccination itself. So the countries really do not have at this moment adequate post-vaccination surveillance. In the developed countries, the post-vaccination surveillance and also the database is much better than ours. And this is what we need to invest on as we look at the vaccination as politics in totality. Because some of the people, particularly the disadvantaged group of people, have not only been constrained in terms of their awareness, in terms of access, but they're also constrained in terms of their awareness or access to health facilities to have post-vaccination surveillance or monitoring or follow-ups in that way. So that is also one of the points to look at. I think this will be a major issue with our public health system. It will be a major issue with the health policy activists, and I'm sure it will be a matter of concern for the public policy leaders in South Asia. Colleagues, those are fantastic 5 issues, and I think you have pushed me to think further in this area. I'm grateful to you.
Rumila, you need to unmute yourself.
Thank you, sir. Now it is the time to invite our chair of the session, Professor Atikul Islam, Vice Chancellor of North-South University, to deliver his speech.
Deliver my speech. I think the speeches that were relevant have been delivered. Discussions have taken place. We've learned a lot of things. My role, I believe, is to thank everyone concerned who has been helping this great conference. Honorable Mr. M. Mannan, Minister for Planning, Government of the People's Republic of Bangladesh, Dr. Angel Redlenier, Executive Director, NASPAA, Ms. Laurel McFarland, Senior Fellow, Executive Director, Emeritus, NASPAA, Professor Errol D'Souza, Director, IIM Ahmedabad, Mr. Azimuddin Ahmed, Honorable Chair of the Board of Trustees of North-South University, Triparna Osavada, another important presence here. I also acknowledge presence here of Professor Salahuddin Aminuzzahman, who has been a good friend of NSU and a mentor for the SIPG, the way I look at it. And of course, our Devopriya Bhattacharya, who is, I must say, one of the topmost public intellectuals in this country. I recently read a book on the role of public intellectuals in India. I think these people play the role of conscience of the nation. They guide the nation. They advise the governments, or at simply say things that the government can take in formulating their policies. These are invaluable people. We are so glad to see that Dr. Devapriya could manage time to join us this early in the morning of a Friday, which happens to be weekend in Bangladesh. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are, ladies and gentlemen. North-South University is an engaged university. We engage with the world community, we engage with the region, we engage with various sectors of the economy, we engage with the government, industry, and professions of this country. And we want to intellectually engage as many people as we can in debates, discussions, in free speech within our campus, from where we hope this will radiate outside. Ladies and gentlemen, let me first of all thank our Honorable Minister. He to me seems to be a very enlightened, energetic, and able minister in the government of the People's Republic of Bangladesh. He's also a good friend of North-South, and he speaks from his heart, which is a good thing. He doesn't simply, he's not a typical politician, I must say. He speaks his heart, which is fantastic. Let me let me thank our chair of the Board of Trustees, Mr. Azimuddin Ahmed. I know how busy he is running industries and companies at the same time, running one of the largest private universities in this country. Let me thank SIPG, IIM, and NASPAA for joining hands together and put on such a fantastic conference. The universities are there to promote debate, and I'm sure over the course of next 3 days, there will be lots of debate, discussion, and lots of things to take home. North-South University takes pride in igniting discussions and debates, in engaging in research that inform policymaking. And I'm sure our policymakers will get quite a lot from here, because the COVID-19 pandemic may not have been totally gone. We hope it is gone, but it's not. People talk about a third wave. Should that happen, we hope it doesn't. We should be prepared for it. And this COVID-19 thing is seen as a so-called black swan event, meaning things will never be exactly the same after COVID-19 as it was before COVID-19. So what has happened? It has changed education, manufacturing, conferencing. You don't have to fly. You can stay at home and join various meetings and conferences. It has changed almost every aspect of our life. For example, blended delivery of education has become a reality. I don't think it's going to go away. Now, so what the policymakers or the public leaders need to do is adjust to those changes, is to take advantage even of those changes, master the whole situation, and formulate policies and programs that will keep their nation at the top. So the question of the lingering problem of the new poor, the informal sector people, the service sector people, as mentioned by our inaugural speaker, those questions have not been totally answered yet. We need to have policies for that. As our honorable inaugural speaker brought out, let me first of all thank him for speaking with all facts and figures and stats. That is something which is a rarity in this country. People speak deliver very highly emotional speeches and get lots of claps. But we are short on facts and figures and stats. This was a presentation that got me thinking, and I think there is so much further to mine from this speech. There are so many interactivities, underlying things that scholars will explore out of Dr. Bhattacharya's presentation. I would say that we get a copy of it from him and use it in the classroom as an exercise and use it for the benefit and enrichment of our teachers. At this stage, I think I should stop.
Mr. Chair.
Session will be on soon.
Mr. Chair, Professor, I am getting requests for the PowerPoint. So will you kindly, somebody put it up in the chat box, the link, so that they can download it from there.
Thank you so much for your generosity. Professor Sheikh Tawfiq will do it happily, I know.
I will put it up in my other website.
Thank you, Dr. So let me once again thank everyone, all the participants, all the presenters of papers in the days to come, all discussants or moderators for joining in this big effort or initiative taken by Professor Sheikh Tawfiq and NASPAA and IIM. Thank you all, and I wish you all a fantastic conference over the next 3 days. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for the valuable speech. Distinguished audience, now it is the time to wrap up the inauguration of the NASPAA South Asia Virtual Conference 2021. Thank you all for joining us. We look forward to meeting you all at 11:30 a.m. on the plenary keynote session by Ms. Yamini Iyer, President and Chief Executive, Center for Policy Research in India. Thank you.
So we will have the same link. So if you can just stay for another 10 minutes, we will join the next keynote. We'll start at 11:30. Again, thank you all for joining.